Good evening and welcome to Restart, the webinar and podcast series brought to you by Arabian Business and the Prestige Group. Now, it's the biggest story of the year, or indeed of the decade, and the news that vaccines are beginning to be rolled out. We're hoping that the vaccines can give us a happy new year and we can all restart our lives. So as we look to put 2020 in the rearview mirror, I'm delighted to be joined by three experts from the pharma industry. And to unpack that, tonight I am joined by Ayhman Mokhtar, the Regional President, Middle East, Turkey and the Levant for Viatris. He's also formerly GM of Pfizer. Gizem, Akalin, the Vice President and GM for GlaxoSmithKline, GSK, in the Gulf region, and Madhukar, Tanna, CEO of Pharmax Pharmaceuticals. Guys, welcome to the podcast and the webinar. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
And a message to everybody tuning in. Please, if you've got questions for our panel tonight, please post them in the comments section and we will try and get to them. So nobody wants to hear from me. Everybody wants to hear from you tonight. So I'm going to start off with the first question already. We're already beginning to see vaccines being put into the arms of patients around the world. With that happening now, where do you think we're all going to be in 12 months' time? And I'm going to start with Gizem, if I may.
Thank you very much, Scott. So I think we've been going through quite tough times in 2020. And it's amazing to hear the news and the innovation. Vaccinations has been started in UK, in UAE, in many other markets. So 12 months' time, I see more hope and promising. More vaccines being available for the public health is going to be, a little bit more relief each and every day. So I perceive a phased approach in going back to the normal life, not immediately until everyone is vaccinated or treated with COVID-19. And all the big pharma companies are working on that. I mean, GSK is an example. We're working on that. Some big global manufacturers are already started to, at the end of their phase 3 trials or started vaccination. Just as a very, very small information, even in US today, there are close to 600 clinical trials are being, executed on COVID-19. So I think it's also important to show the massive collaboration and effort that pharma, in collaboration with the health institutions, is putting in place to take care of it. So I perceive, in short, a very promising 2021, but I believe it's going to be gradual, not immediate.
Ayhman, are we going to be able to ditch the masks quickly, or what do you see for the next 12 months?
Well, first of all, thank you, Scott, for the kind introduction and for hosting me today. That's a great pleasure and honor, to be honest. And quickly back to your question, everybody has to keep the mask on till we see, of course, the reality that we're living today coming to an end. So to be very specific, I still see the positive side of 2021, and I, of course, don't foresee that happening immediately. I would say that this might take us some time, potentially till through the third quarter, potentially till end of 2021, till getting back to normal when it comes to the normal day-to-day activities. Nevertheless, I see something which is very dear to our minds and hearts. I don't believe even if we get to the vaccine, life will get back to the normal, even in the business context and on everyday treatments. So I potentially believe that, yes, there will be a relief on the healthcare side when it comes to the, of course, the burden that we're dealing with today. But I don't think that life will get back to normal when it comes to business activities and the way that we interact with each other.
Madhukar, I mean, lots of people have almost like put their lives on hold thinking that we're going to get back to normal. And Ayhman there is saying, actually, he doesn't think that's going to be the case. Are we looking at having to accept a new normal, or do you disagree with Ayhman, or do you agree with Ayhman there?
No, I think that the right phrase you used is a new normal. We are all going to be worried, continue to be worried, even after getting vaccines, because these vaccines are very new. There is a very limited clinical data. So we do not know how this is going to create the antibodies and protection against COVID. So as Ayhman mentioned, It's going to be gradual. It's going to be slowly phasing out to the larger population. As I read recently that US population, general population, is going to get vaccines sometime in second quarter. So it's going to continue for a while, this kind of scenario, but it's a huge relief, if I can say. And there is a hope that we will be able to beat, through the genetic technology, through the science, this pandemic, which we unprecedented pandemic which we went through, or in 2020. I would like to add one more thing, that is, it's going to spur the lot of regional investments in preparedness for what I call it as a pandemic preparedness in coming years in the region, especially in our region.
What do we think about the regional response? I mean, I think if we look at, certainly, we're speaking from the UAE today, we've had a very different pandemic to many other parts of the world, and we're going to go into a very different holiday season than certainly parts of Europe and many parts of America. The UAE's approved China's Sinopharm vaccine. They're already inviting people over in Abu Dhabi to come and turn up for vaccinations. We've seen the news from Saudi Arabia today that they're also going to be vaccinated. What's our opinion of the position in the region, particularly for the UAE, for example? And Gizem, I'll start with you again, if I may. What's your thoughts?
So I perceive positive, first of all. So I don't think that we're in a position that, I mean, X, Y, and Z. I mean, it is an area that we need to collaborate more, and the demand is huge, and we don't really see, I mean, how long it would protect, or what would be the consequences. So we really on a phase of learning as a whole overall population, and that's why I perceive this for UAE perspective as well positive. Yeah. But there's going to be a huge demand, and that's why I think on the pipeline all these vaccination options is important, and it's going to add value. So I totally perceive it as a positive signal.
Ayhman, what do we know about the China Sinopharm vaccine? I mean, I think I was reading today that it's 86% efficacy. Is that correct?
Well, this is all what we read, Scott, and you're correct. This is what has been publicly available information on the Sinopharm vaccine. However, let me start by pausing here and say that I think we're all lucky living in this country, because the level of efforts and the leadership of the crisis from the early inception was phenomenal to me as a resident of the UAE. So not only being lucky for living in a country that made the vaccine available as early as possible, but I would say from early on, from the way that this crisis has been managed, was, to be honest, exemplary, and thanks to the leaders of this country who put their hands on first minute to manage and to listen to the expert opinion, which is unique to this country, I have to say. To your point, we see a great positive outcomes, and I would say positive to the extent that keeps everybody comfortable with the early beginning to start with, not only with Sinopharm vaccine, but with different options that globally will be made available. But worth mentioning, of course, that the UAE authorities has declared that the Sinopharm vaccine has been made available for emergency use by the Ministry of Health and Prevention, but they are also committing to run what we call the post-phase safety and efficacy studies. So they continue to study the vaccine as they roll it out post the emergency use authorization that they have been granted, which is, to be honest, gives me much more comfort and confidence on the way forward. The results we have seen goes way beyond the 86%, because it goes, for example, to a level of protection that is very high and exceeds 99% and 100% for moderate to severe cases, which is the real news to me.
Okay. Madhukar, I mean, I'm casting my mind back to March, when certainly here in Dubai we weren't allowed out of our houses for once every 3 days to go shopping, and then we heard early stories coming out of the UAE beginning its vaccine trials, and one of the first to advance through some of the research levels. So they've been leading the way. They've been on the front foot from the start. Is that a fair assessment?
It is a very, very fair assessment. I think they have taken the leadership. Sinopharm vaccine is one way of producing vaccines compared to other players. It's just a different technology. But I think the vast number of patients have taken it. There is not a grave side effect so far observed. So I think it's an excellent experiment. I think the UAE authorities have done in order to reduce the anxiety of the patients, as well as provide a solution in the long term. So this is, I think, as far as I know of, I've been in the UAE for 20 years. This is the first mass-scale clinical trial program, extremely well managed, to provide a phase 3 study in UAE with the local data, and that is something incredible. As Ayman mentioned, the Ministry of Health and Prevention and the leaders of this country have taken, and that has reduced. Once again, I'm repeating, but I think that has reduced the anxiety and provided comfort to the population of UAE.
So I'm going to come to the sort of the pharma industry side of things to a moment. I'm just going to ask another question because I think lots of people are asking about how we think this is going to play out. I mean, do we think this is going to be like the flu shot? Is this going to be something that we're going to have every year? Do you think it's going to be optional? Do you think it's going to be mandatory? This vaccine or these vaccines are very much going to become part of our lives moving forward. Gizem, I'm going to again come to you first on this one.
I mean, my personal opinion is not going to be optional because unless, if you're being vaccinated or treated fully, then it's very easy. It's not very easy to talk about, a complete relief from a pandemic standpoint. So I think, so the question for me is, okay, once we're vaccinated, what would be the second phase that we need, or third phase, or what would be the, long-term efficacy or responses we're going to see, and so on and so forth. So that is where actually we are all curious about. But I believe whether having the vaccine or not cannot be optional. It should be mandatory, and we want to make sure that we are all secured from that disease.
Ayman, I'd hope you'd say yes to this question, but you're comfortable with the vaccine being a mandatory requirement? I can see Qantas, for example, already talking about the fact that, no vaccine, no fly, that sort of thing. Do we see this being part of the visa medical, shall we say, for the UAE if you want to be a resident here? You're comfortable with this being a mandatory process?
Well, I cannot, of course, comment on the final decision that authorities might take in this regard, but I will put my personal opinion and potentially wish even. To be honest, I know that everybody has the luxury and freedom in terms of course, when it comes to patient ethics to choose, but not when it comes to the overall healthcare of the community or of a society. So to be honest, personally, I will personally advocate of the mandatory vaccination because that will help all of us to go back to the normal as soon as possible. And it doesn't delay the phases that we go, which impacts not only the health and well-being of people, but it impacts the economies and the way that we survive.
Yeah. Madhukar, again, I'm going to come to you to agree or disagree with that. Mandatory, we're kind of, for the large part, we're comfortable with our children having vaccinations when they're young. For the large part, there are a few of our friends in the US that sometimes don't agree with that. But yourself, what's your view on mandatory vaccinations here?
I think it will be divided on the patient group basis. There are high-risk patients. Elderly people would definitely be vaccinated. Healthcare professionals will have to be vaccinated. I only have a slight doubt about young adolescents and children, whether they would be vaccinated or not. I think the clinical data will suggest whether they should be vaccinated or not. Speaking of UAE, we have a vast number of tourists coming in the country throughout the year. So people coming in from other countries, I think they should be vaccinated at the airports the way it is. Right now, we have been tested. Same way they should be vaccinated, especially for all age groups.
Right.
Sorry, except the children. So I'm not very sure about the children and adolescents. But other than that, I agree that definitely it should be a mandatory vaccination program, not only one time, but it's going to last for a few years. And I think there should be also repeat vaccination depending upon the clinical data and the duration of efficacy.
That's an interesting point. That I mean, one of the benefits of the vaccination program is obviously maybe we can begin to have confidence in traveling around the world again. So mandatory vaccinations, either. I mean, my son's just flown in from Dublin, had to have the PCR test before he flew in. Some people, if there is a travel corridor, they're arriving and getting tested here. Gizem, mandatory vaccinations for people flying in before they come? Do they need certificates or have it at the airport? What do you think there? Interesting.
I think it's a decision needs to be done by the local authorities for sure, and it's really my personal point of view. It should be there because to prevent overall public health in a very the global world, it seems inevitable. But of course, as mentioned, different age groups, or how would it be, or what sort of pre-test will be required. These all needs to be analyzed before giving for sure sharp decisions or not affecting the overall tourism activity. But definitely there needs to be some precautionary actions, because otherwise it won't mean a lot to vaccinate only the residents by itself.
Right. And a quick shout out there to the people tuning in. If you've got a view on this, then please post it in the comment, or if you want to ask a question around this area, please do so. Let's move on and we'll switch gears a little bit. I mean, the development of the vaccines from an industry perspective has been, unprecedented is one of the words of the year. This purely has been unprecedented. How much of an achievement is this for the industry? I think we came into this conversation saying, Big Pharma has really stepped up to the plate this year. What's your view on that? And Madhukar, I've been keeping you to the end so far, so I'm going to ask you to go first this time. What do you think? Well, this really is unprecedented from an industry point of view.
It is absolutely unprecedented, where the beginning of phase 1 or preclinical were done in beginning of year, or when we knew that it's a pandemic which is going to create an havoc around the world. And starting from February till December, what Pfizer's or Moderna and many other companies have done is incredible. I would also like to add the winner of the year, I would say, is the breakthrough in genetic technology, which we have been talking about it. There was a gradual rollout of the genetic technology products, whereas here it's a very, very short-term rollout. So I think that's really going to increase the investments and demand for not only for the vaccines, but also the genetically created treatments, which I believe US FDA has been pushing for it. So Eli Lilly's of this world, who have created antibodies, and many other antibodies will come for the treatment part of COVID, because let's not forget that vaccination is one side of the story. We are not going to eliminate the disease, so we will continue to require the treatment, and that is also going to expand in the coming. So it's a big, big breakthrough to the medical science.
Ayhman, how have we got here so fast? I remember headlines were, originally in 2020 we were hoping for breakthroughs, but I don't think any of the headlines were putting breakthroughs this quickly. Realistically, I don't think anybody expected it to be this quick. How has the pharmaceutical industry got here so quickly?
Well, it is absolutely fantastic achievement for the pharmaceutical industry in general, and for those who was able to run the show and come to the final line as we see it today. So, to be honest, this pandemic has learned us how leadership, collaboration, and the true spirit of partnership can come together to generate something that is one of its kind, and it didn't happen before in the history of pharmaceutical sector. So, for example, we have seen companies coming together, and instead of competing with each other, coming together to prove something, that when you stand for innovation, when you stand for science, when you stand for humanity, you can bring outstanding achievement that hasn't been done prior to the human history. And again, we have seen things that didn't happen before. We have seen authorities and government partnering and reaching to the pharmaceutical sector, supporting them in probably running and accelerating clinical trials that used to take years to generate the similar outcome that we have seen here. We have seen companies on the other side putting the investment forward. You know quite well, Scott, and probably the audience know it, that it takes billions to generate one molecule because of different risks and different clinical trials that you have to put in place. Here come the pharmaceutical industry and started to put investment ahead of the curve to prove to the entire universe that we're here to support, and when we're here, we produce something that is one of its kind.
I mean, Gizem, it was actually a question I was going to ask later, but Ayman's made a really good point there. I mean, traditionally, the pharmaceutical industry has been incredibly competitive, secretive, competitive. Is that one of the things that you have seen changed massively this year? And I'd go further to say, do you think you're going to be able to retain that? You know, is this a one-time deal, or do you think the industry has been changed for good, you know, and as a way of working moving forward from here?
So what I believe is collaboration is the key piece, but competition is also very healthy in the science and the health industry. Because if you're going to compete for the best of the public health, if you're working or competing for better medicines, then that's good and healthy. So, but it doesn't necessarily be a substitute to each other. So while you're competing, it shouldn't have to mean that you shouldn't have to collaborate as well. And I agree with Ayman. Actually, this has been a marvelous, I would say, change in the pharma industry, that if we come together for a common purpose, how fast things could move and how we could help the overall public health or our patients in different terms. So I find this collaboration as one step that we will take it further. So collaborations will move. But on the other hand, competition will be there as well. And that healthy competition is actually relevant and vital for the overall health community, because it would lead us to better medicines at the end, or vaccines.
Madhukar, I'm just going to take one step back and just put my public hat on. Again, from the public's point of view, I mean, this has been incredibly fast. This has been an unprecedented collaboration. Industry, the government, regulators have come together to make this happen really quickly. From the kind of the insider's view, from inside the industry, how safe is this process? How confident are you in the science of the process, the rigor of the process that you have seen taking place on all of the vaccine developments?
I think, since both my colleagues mentioned, it's a collaborative rather than competitive approach for a public health issue. If we are talking about here a global health disaster, and if that is the case, then definitely a collaborative approach is extremely important. If you recall, the genetic sequence was released by China from Wuhan maybe about a year ago, and it was shared to all the countries whosoever would like to do the research on genetic sequencing and develop the vaccines. So, but as Gizem mentioned, competition is healthy, and I think pharmaceutical industry will continue to compete and come out with maybe a better product, better vaccines, longer lasting immunity. These kind of things will continue. Maybe there could be a different variant of a virus which we may see after a year, and that also will require a treatment. So I think both competition and collaboration when it comes to a public health issue. In the past, I can only recall a similar collaboration happened when pharmaceutical companies came together for an AIDS treatment or for H1N1, but this one is incredible short period of time and achievement.
I mean, it's on government, but it's also on the pharmaceutical industry as well. We're staring down the barrel of a massive logistical challenge. You know, this is going to be a race against time over the next 12 months to get these different vaccines, which require different each come with different logistical challenges, storages, that sort of thing. How's the industry going to step up and cope and adapt to that and facilitate that so we all get the vaccine that we need?
Excellent question, Scott. And it's worth mentioning that by the time that companies, Pfizer, Moderna, and others, they started to develop the vaccine, they started to work on in the parallel approach on the logistics and the supply chain related logistics that will support the storage, the delivery of the vaccine to the final destination and to the end of the vaccination step. So at the time that the vaccine trials was running, companies started to put in place innovative approaches on how they are going to immediately deploy the development and the delivery of the vaccines once developed. And this is what you see, Scott. Immediately, by the time that you get the vaccine approved, actually within matter of few hours or days, the vaccine have been transformed. And I think UK started vaccination this week, and you see UAE is already on the way. So it's exactly the innovation that happened in the pharma space to develop it. There was a parallel innovation into the delivery system and the supply chain logistics to allow the delivery of the vaccine. And here we are.
Okay, I'm going to ask a big question now. I've been talking to Blair Shepherd, who is the global head of strategy of PricewaterhouseCoopers, and he fears for the next 10 years. He thinks there's lots of things that need to change in the next 10 years for us to avoid a difficult landscape in 10 years' time. Where does the pharmaceutical industry go over the next 10 years? How is it going to evolve, and how is it going to be part of the solution moving forward? We've seen what it can do in 2020. What does it do over the next decade? Big question. Gizem, I'm going to throw that one to you first.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think in the upcoming 10 years, so there are going to be multiple different, I would say, evolutions. That's our belief.
Yeah.
The first piece is, of course, in terms of R&D. For sure, this once again emphasized the importance of vaccination and prevention before treatment. So in that area, I perceive that this created more awareness, and it would also trigger more research on that territory. So this is number one. Second, again, from an R&D perspective, more gene therapies or personalized treatments, personal diagnostics. So in these territories, there will be evolutions. And then also this COVID-19 changed our way of living. And plenty of things are turned out to be digital. And in that environment, health and healthcare continuity will be in a different, I would say, setting, including, kickoff of telemedicines and all these sorts of stuff. So patient access, reach, sustainability, in all these areas, we're going to have a different world. So as pharma industry, and of course, I'm not mentioning even the recent developments in the tech, artificial intelligence, and so on and so forth. So there are plenty of different changes happening upfront in R&D, upfront our relationship within the industry as well as with the governments, and as well as, patient access, treatment, diagnostics, and so on. So we believe that, the pharma companies who are adopting this change on all of these, I would say, aspects will be the ones really standing up in the upcoming 10 years.
Madhukar, again, I'm going to ask if you agree with that. And I'm also going to ask, basically, do we need to move beyond the fact that it's a vaccination and it's a mask? Gizem's talking there about telemedicine. Data surely is going to play a massive part over the next decade, is it?
Yes, data is going to play a very massive part. It's a new oil, they call it as. But at the same time, I would like to give a little bit of different perspective on next 10 years. If you look at the global population, the developed world is going to be fine with the advanced technology and advanced medicines and vaccines, the latest vaccines from Moderna and Pfizer's. But it's going to take 5-7 years before a proper global supply chain being created for the developing nations to reach this kind of vaccines. And that is where I think WHO, local governments, there is going to be a lot of investment in supply chain to even make available the vaccines which are transported at maybe -5 or -10 degree compared to -85 degree. So there will be a fair bit of investment in supporting the public health in the developing nations, because 85% of the children are born in the developing nations.
Ayhman, your thoughts on that? I mean, I was listening to the BBC this morning, and I was hearing them reporting on concern in the developing world that, you know, the big Western nations, the big industrialized nations, have already bought a lot of the stock, and they feel that they're going to be at the end of the, you know, at the end of the line for this vaccine. How can the pharmaceutical industry help the developing world meet this challenge?
Okay, Scott, of course, it's true that the developing world versus the developed world can be completely different. However, we've been all made aware about the initiative that has been taken by the group of companies that started to get the vaccine into finding ways with the WHO to get to the vaccine to the people who need it on those countries earlier than, especially for the high-risk category. So there are some efforts already in place, and pharma companies are mindful of the fact that it's not only about giving the vaccine to the people that they get first access to it, but how can you reach and develop innovative initiatives that could be corporate social responsibilities to develop the vaccines, particularly to those people who are in need of it. And to your first question, Scott, related to the 10 years of the industry, I personally believe that we have seen three key trends that will continue to evolve into the coming years. I mean, particularly the technology and the way that the technology completely redefined the way that we interacted here, but potentially how the healthcare interaction is happening with the different stakeholders that is playing in the same field. We've seen the government visions and priorities putting the agenda ahead of anything that you can come ahead. So when there is a public crisis, where the public health issues, you see how the vision and the priorities come to place and how pharma companies responded to that. And finally, the increased role of the public-private partnership. I mean, now more than ever, we have seen the confidence of the governments to support and to start to actively participate in more public-private partnership. And I believe this trend will continue to evolve, and pharma industry will be, of course, leading this pathway.
Gizem, I mean, Hollywood always likes to take pot shots at big anything, really. But do you think 2020 has kind of lifted the lid for the public on the contribution that pharmaceutical and big pharma, shall we say, can make? I mean, there's a lot of science, there's a lot of dedicated people. You know, we saw the scientists that actually kind of cracked their code originally, that sort of thing. Do you think this is given the public a better understanding of what happened, actually, what is the reality within the industry?
I think you're spot on, Scott. I mean, it's been a tremendous year for pharma industry for multiple ends, actually. So one end is this accelerated R&D development and all these scientists and collaboration of the companies and working, you know, for new vaccines, as well as from the not only the prevention but treatment side of the story. That's one end. But on the second hand, we shouldn't have to forget, in 2020, still people from other diseases as well continue to get their medicines. And in all manufacturing facilities, all workers of pharma, you know, they have put a lot of effort for the sustainability of the other available medicines as well, to make sure that people are getting treated for different diseases. So that's why I think one part of the story is the real hard work of, from 5 to 8 years minimum development of medicine or vaccines to a 1.5 year time frame. That's one part of the story. But on the other hand, I believe all pharma industry put a tremendous effort on manufacturing, continue production, logistics, supply, and making sure that also for the other diseases we're continue to support the public. So from both ends, I think pharma industry did a phenomenal job in 2020 and continue to do in 2021.
Madhukar, I mean, we call it big pharma, but right now, is it big enough? Do we have enough people in the industry? Do we need to be hitting universities up and and recruiting more people into this industry? Because obviously, you're trying to meet a challenge like, well, one we haven't seen for a generation, certainly.
Let's not go ahead of the curve. As Gizem mentioned, but besides COVID vaccine, we have a lot of other medicines to find and treat a number of other diseases, and that's going to take a hell lot of a time and investment. And I would like to just add a point that this is what the dilemma of pharmaceutical industry is, that there is a lot of pressure on pricing, but at the same time there is a lot of demand of newer diseases or existing diseases and treating them with the better medicines. So, sorry, I forgot your question, but
is big pharma big enough? Have you got enough people in the industry? Do you need new blood?
No, definitely not big enough. There is a lot more investment is needed. Again, I go back to the regional investment, because the Western world is well invested. There is a lot of collaborative approach between universities, research centers, and the pharma manufacturers. But I think the rest of the world requires a lot more investment, a lot more capacity and capability to deliver the medicines where it is needed most.
Ayman, from a career perspective, and if I'm if I'm a university student, or I'm a young student looking to think about what am I going to get to study, what industry should I target? Has there ever been a better time, in a weird sort of way, to enter the pharmaceutical industry?
There has been no better time, Scott, indeed, to have to work for a noble mission like the one that I personally be proud of working with. Because, to be honest, I believe that our role goes way beyond providing the medicine per se to the patients, to play a pivotal role. And there was no better time than COVID to show the need of the people working in this industry and the role that they play in order to keep the public health in a good state. However, let me here take the opportunity to say that the trends that we have seen here, even post-COVID, will continue to evolve, because the world will continue to evolve. Yeah. And the healthcare challenges and needs will continue to be existing. And reflecting on your previous question, a strong example could have been, for example, the one that we personally, and we have done it in Viatris, which is a new kind of a healthcare company that's formed from a legacy companies to exactly address the evolving healthcare challenges. And as we always say in our mission, that we see the healthcare as it should be, not as it is. So the answer to your previous question is yes. The healthcare needs more and more, particularly on innovative approaches, more than anything else the R&D that we are practicing today.
From a research perspective, I mean, what has changed this year? What practices have changed that we shouldn't sort of return to the previous pre-COVID way of operating? And while we're talking about it, Ayman, I'll stay with you for me. You talk about innovation. You've come from a legacy company. You're now in a new company looking at innovation. I'm not saying it's a disconnect, but the two serve different. They're different parts of the same puzzle. What's the difference? What's changed, and what do we want to ditch from before, and what do we want to keep and embrace going forward?
Okay. Let me start by giving a technical part and, of course, other much larger perspective. So, for example, the technical part, we have seen last year, as per the data that came from Ernst & Young, that the majority of pharmaceutical companies were focusing on developing anti-cancer drugs. That was the year that preceded the year that we're living, and we have seen COVID. And what we have seen moving forward now with COVID, that yes, we will have the vaccine, but obviously we need to start working from an R&D perspective to start developing some antibiotics and some treatments to treat the cases that will fall apart. So that's the technical part. On the other side, which I would love to continue to highlight, the fact that we have seen technological advancement. We have seen technology playing significant part on the way that we interact and we do business with each other, and moving beyond the traditional way. And I think this will remain. So let me give you a very quick example. For example, clinical trials. We used to take longer time in the absence of the data analytics and artificial intelligence tools. And today, with the real-time analysis that we can get with wearable, or with any advancement that we use in clinical trial, the time has been shortened. And potentially, this is what you will see moving forward, that deployment of the technology will enable us to move forward and cut the time and hence bring the medications earlier to the patients who are in need of it.
I think it's a very interesting development in overall the way vaccine has been rolled out, or vaccines have been rolled out, and what's coming in the future. I hope there is no resistant strain or some kind of a vector which comes up and the vaccine will no longer be effective. I hope so. I mean, people are already talking about some new strain of COVID-19 might emerge, and that would be a big challenge to face.
Excellent. And
yeah, but the good thing is as well, there are multiple researchers moving on simultaneously, so which would help, different vaccines to be available and, more potential solutions. Hi, Scott.
Ayhman, you were talking about technology there and technology advances. You could have started with my laptop. It seems like you're having a good conversation, so I'm surplus to requirements.
I was very much interested to know, we have connected earlier, of course, but what could be the first lesson that you have from leadership perspective of this crisis? This is very dear to my heart.
Yes, I think so. We are also, leading big teams, and COVID has not only impacted, it's impacted our day-to-day lives, but also it opened up plenty of opportunities from a leadership standpoint. I think as leaders, we became more engaged with our people in this virtual environment. And I personally had more time with my team to meet and engage and understand and even get closer. So that was, I would say, the half positive or full side of the glass. That's one piece. And second piece is that also it enables us to get together and support each other, and that clearly shows that actually in the internal engagement surveys that we've been doing in my company as well, that we felt that this has been well recognized and understood by our people. And overall in GSK, we've seen a very positive upside trend about more engagement, giving more credibility to the company. So it created a positive environment in terms of supporting each other and engaging with our people. That's what what I observed.
I'm going to give you the option to the option to talk again as well, Gizem, because we've actually had a question posted in the comments from one of our panelists who's asking about HCP engagement, which is something that you may know about. What do you suggest pharmaceuticals do to avoid HCPs bombarded with too many promotional messages in digital channels?
Healthcare professionals, first of all. that's an abbreviation from the pharma companies. So it's because of the access issues. We have started our digital engagements, webinars or in different, I would say, by using different technological tools. We've started having engagements with our doctors or pharmacists, and we started to do it at the same time as a whole for pharma world. And at the end of the day, they found themselves in a situation that someone is pinging from the phone or sending invitations nonstop, and they cannot stop their routines, which is why they are there. So it started a little bit off on the other edge of the stream, but I believe it's an evolution. So when things evolve, it also happens. Sometimes it's a little bit of a promotional poisoning. Sometimes it goes beyond its boundaries. But at the end of the day, I believe the most important thing is the customized approach based on our, I would say, physicians' needs. Wherever the availability and however we need to inform them for the better treatment of their patients, we have to be there with that methodology. It would be digital, it would be face-to-face, it doesn't matter. But what we need to be mindful about their times, and what we need to be mindful about how we phrase it. So it is not about how we approach them, but it is not about taking one approach as the only approach and then really going on the other extreme that would really create a burden on the system.
Madhukar, it's interesting because we were talking earlier about sort of the public perception of pharmaceutical, but that's the public. From the healthcare provider, from the healthcare industry, how has it changed your relationship this process 2020 between you as a pharmaceutical industry and actually your prima facie customer, which is the healthcare provider?
Actually, this year has been very challenging for us in particular. This is my first year of commercial operations, and a number of healthcare professionals were disappointed that we could not deliver the medicines to them in right time, in the right quantity. So it has been one of the challenge. And I think I would also like to add what Gizem was describing about the medical communication. It has been a bombardment of certain non-commercial, commercial messages more than required. But that was the need of which we had to do something to survive as well. And the digital communication is evolving, and we should be fine-tuning it in the coming years. But all in all, the supply chain was a major issue between us and the healthcare professionals.
Ayhman, your take on that? Supply chain obviously has got to be vital. If you can't get the product to the customer, you're in trouble, no?
Absolutely. And I think you talked a lot, Scott, about the value that we bring as an industry to from innovation point of view and bring vaccines to life. But equally important, mind you, there are hundreds of thousands of patients in this country, and globally millions of patients continue to need their medication that is outside the COVID perspective. And I think one of the biggest achievements that we have been able to do is to continue to have our commitment during such rough times. People working in the factories, our colleagues, for example, we continue to offer them the environment that allow them to continue to go to work, because as far like the frontliners, they have to continue to go to the factories to produce the medicines for people who are in need of it. And I think that gives you a different perspective of the way that we dealt with the crisis. So it was not only the focus to bring the vaccine, but how to make sure that patients that are well served when it comes to their treatment, but potentially back to the point of the healthcare professionals' communication, how we make sure that the patient receive the medicine that they need. And I think that we have all seen the development in the telemedicine. And just give you some numbers, for example, in the telemedicine industry is expected to grow on a constant 19.3% to reach more than $200 billion industry in 2026. So there is a strong shift of all what we do, and it's a big learning that we had during COVID crisis.
That's an interesting point as well. I think our props have. I'm only thinking this for the first time now, and obviously we quite rightly look at the healthcare providers and call them our frontline heroes. But you know, as an office worker, I've been quite happily sat at home typing away on my laptop, writing stories. But your industry still had to turn up to work every day to get these products out to save lives. Gizem, I'll start with you.
Yes, I mean it's been a very tough year for the pharma workers, I would say, or people working both in the R&D facilities as well as in manufacturing, supply, logistics. So the life was as usual, or even harder for them. And I think that they deserve a big credit on that end. So we're I mean, our office-based employees, they enjoyed sometimes it might be slightly boring maybe, but still, you know, they were at home working from home. And also moving onwards, the companies give office-based employees more flexibility or even support to let them be more effective and, you know, in their daily work. But for some parts of the industry, it was not possible to do that way. Yeah. And manufacturing is one of them, supply is one of them. And starting when the HCP started, you know, the healthcare professionals started and the routine life is evolving better. Our people working like the representatives started their work in the hospital. So we need to be really thankful to all of them putting that great effort during the pandemic, and they still continue to do it. So I really appreciate as a leader that's the only thing that I can say.
Scott, I would like to add exactly. I run a pharmaceutical factory where we have never closed, not even a day. Factory was closed. because some or other activities were ongoing, and all my staff worked with all precautions and all necessary necessary disinfectants and things like that. So I agree that they deserve an incredible round of applause to continue to produce and supply medicines. I would like to add just one more point, since we are discussing a couple of points on supply chain. I think post-COVID, with the technology and a lot of enablers have come, where I do see a possibility that a lot of patients in advanced world or even in this country might get their medicines at their doorstep with the possibility of telemedicines and delivery of medicines as well. So I think that is something which I'm closely looking at, that in next couple of years, I wouldn't be surprised that I don't have to go to the retail chain physically to pick up my prescription, but it can be possibly delivered at home.
I'm conscious of the time. You have all been incredibly gracious with yours. Ayman, I'm going to ask you the one last question. I'll pose it to you all. 2021, what's exciting you looking at 2021?
Well, getting out of this as soon as possible. That's what excites me most. Well, what excites me most about 2021, of course, it will be the year where we will start embracing and deploying all the learning that we had. To be honest, as a leader, there are two big things that I learned during the COVID issue, and I wouldn't call it crisis, by the way. I would say the public health issue. We've learned the empathy and we have learned the resilience. And I think those things will help me navigating through any single particular challenge that I will face in my life, 2021 and forward. I know that life should come gradually to normal into 2021, but I'm super excited to see how we will deploy the learning and move forward into a different perspective coming out of COVID to continue towards the mission that we have, which is, of course, empowering people to live healthier at every stage of their life. That's what excites me most. I want really to continue to play that part and make sure, as an employee of Viatris, to continue to empower people to live healthier at every stage of their life.
Great answer. Madhukar, try and follow that. What's exciting you for 2021?
Well, 2021 is going to be one of the busiest years for us. We roll out lots of new products. So we are extremely busy in terms of launching a lot of new products. There are a lot of ongoing projects which were kind of delayed. That will pick up steam in 2021. We have a regional expansion plan. So my plate is full for 2021.
And Gizem, you had the first word, so I will give you the last word. How excited are you for 2021?
Thank you. So I'm so excited. First of all, I'm so hopeful. So I'm expecting a positive trend and more relief and getting back closer to our normal lives. That excites me first. And the second piece, I agree. I mean, we have a quite busy schedule, new launches. And yes, I mean, we're very positive about 2021. So we want to back as usual, as fast as possible, as overall. And continue to support. Thank you.
That's excellent. I'd like to say thank you to all my panelists, Ayhman, Madhukar, Gizem, for your time tonight. Thank you so much. Fascinating conversation. I'd like to say thank you for everyone that's tuned in and has some patience with any technical issues tonight. Thank you for joining the Restart webinar and podcast series from Arabian Business and Prestige Group. And I think at this point, I'm just going to have to say it's 16 days before 2020 is over. Come on. So for those who are about to enjoy a happy holiday period, all the best. And from Arabian Business and Prestige Group, have a great 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.